Hey, hello and welcome to this really fun tutorial by Flomotion. Because today we are going to take a look at this really cool effect, heavily inspired by the Umbrella Academy. So just follow me into After Effects. And in here, before we even start, let's quickly talk about what we're going to create today. So obviously we are going to recreate this teleport effect that you have seen in the intro. And this one really got famous some years ago when the film Jumper came out. Because that movie just had so many of those effects in it. And actually in the industry you still call it the Jumper effect until today. And after that there have obviously been many movies and series that featured that effect. Like for example Heroes Reborn, which had this really nice effect that you're seeing right here. And maybe you guessed it, a few years back I was also working on Heroes Reborn as a compositing artist, so I'm trying to also give you some insights while doing this tutorial. And again, this one is a bit hard to describe because we're not creating that one teleporter effect that we are going to tweak. Actually, we are going to create 5 or even 6 different effects, and in combination they will make up this really nice effect. So let me quickly show you what we're going to do. At first, I'm going to show you how to edit and record the footage. And we do a simple edit where I'm just fading out and we have the clean plate behind myself. As a second one, I have this warping effect. And honestly speaking, I don't like it that much, this wave warp, because it doesn't look very organic. But I just wanted to show it to you because this is what they really used in the Umbrella Academy. So next is a displacement effect. As you can see here, or what you can not see here is me, because I'm somehow transparent, or the background is warping around myself. And I'm going to show you how you can create this displacement effect. On top of all of this will be an effect called flomotion. And yeah, that's really an effect within After Effects. And if you want to learn more about that specific effect, I did a tutorial just on that, and I will link it right here. As the most obvious one, we are going to create the portal. And again, it's all about the details. So we are also going to create this layer that I just called blue outlines, because that's what it basically is. I just added that as a small detail. Because when you take a look at my example, what I found very important for the effect is that before I disappear, the effect already builds up. So that there's something happening before the effect, then there comes the effect, and then there's also some details happening a few frames after the effect has already happened. So let's get this thing done. Let's start with number 1, the edit. And therefore I have 2 footage files that I've shot. By the way, I shot all of this in 4K so that I'm later on able to zoom in the footage, and all the camera movement you see in the final image is all added digitally later on. But with having a fixed camera, I can film both of the shots. So the first one, which is me sitting, and the second one, which is me coming out of the couch. And you can see here how I filmed that, because I wanted to have like an impact. That was very important for me to make it look convincing. So when I'm sitting on the chair, I have the movement, so my body goes backwards into the chair, and I wanted to have the same movement in here. So when I simply cut this somewhere in here, that should already look pretty convincing, because I kept the flow between those 2 shots. Okay, really nice. So for now, let's just delete the footage 2.1, because we're only concentrating on the first effect, because the other one is simply just a copy and paste of the first one. I also shot a clean plate, which is obviously just my living room without any action happening. In addition to that, I filmed some extra clips, like me blowing against all those papers and me wiggling on those lamps, and also on the pictures in the background. And then later on I just rotoed out the different parts and placed them where the effect impact happens to make it look more convincing overall. So now we bring the footage on top, and now let's define where our effect should start and where it should end. And maybe about here I want everything to start, and as I told you, I want everything to start a little bit earlier than the real effect happens. So I can set a marker here, and then I want to go forward maybe until here, set another marker, and this is what we have now. So I'm going to cut that clip here, and you can do that by hitting Ctrl-Shift-D, or you can go to Edit, Split Layer. And now this is the part where our effect should happen. So I'm going to pre-compose this effect. Move all attributes into the new composition. We don't have attributes at the moment, but that allows us to adjust the composition duration to the time span of the selected layers. And when I hit OK, you can see that I have a composition that has exactly that duration, which just helps me to keep it a little bit more organized. And we're almost done with our edit, with our first part. Now I just want this to fade out, so I hit T for opacity, go forward a few frames and bring it down to 0. And this should start when I'm sitting down, maybe until I really touch the chair, something around here. And we are done with step 1. Perfect. So let's save this. So up next is the wave effect. So let's bring out an adjustment layer by hitting Ctrl-Alt-Y, or simply going to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. And we call it our wave. And in the effects and presets, we type in the same, and we get the wave warp effect. And now we can play with the wave height as well as the wave width. And something like that looks just fine. And I'm going to set another marker here. This is my timing where the effect is the strongest. So now let's set a keyframe for the wave height, bring it back to 0 at the beginning and also at the end. And of course, it shouldn't affect the whole image, but only the part where later on the portal should be, or the part where I am sitting down. So we can simply do that by creating a mask, and I'm going to the ellipse tool here, create the ellipse around my body, and simply hit F to feather it. And I'm feathering this a lot, and this is what we have so far. Okay, let's go on. Next in line is our displacement. And let me tell you something, now comes the tricky part, because for all the other effects we will need me separated from the background. So let's duplicate our FX here, get rid of our opacity keyframes and set it back to 100. Now we need to roto me out. So that means going to the pen tool and creating a mask. And the more time you spend with that, the better the effect will look. And I'm quickly doing this just to show you my workflow, or better not to show you my workflow, because I'm really doing this quick and dirty, because when you're doing rotoscoping, you at first really want to take some time. And then it is really important to not make one mask with a hell lot of points around the objects. So not what I'm doing at the moment, but normally you would make simple shapes around all the body parts. For example, start with a circle around the head and then go through your frames and adjust it. And by adjusting, I mean not going into all those points and readjusting them, but simply repositioning the mask, shrink the mask, rotate the mask, because in that way you don't have to deal with a lot of mask points. And in the perfect way, if you really make your mask around specific body parts, you don't have to adjust the mask at all, but only the position, scale and rotation of your mask. Okay, this would be my first frame. I would click on the layer, hit M to get the mask path, set a keyframe and go to the next one, or even better, go a few frames forward and then adjust the mask. But at that point of this tutorial, I'm going to give you a sneak peek into what will be new in After Effects shortly, because at the moment they have a tool called Roto Brush 2, which is already in the beta version and it will come out very soon. What the Roto Brush basically does is you just have to paint really quickly over the parts you want to keep, and the Roto Brush does the rest for you automatically. The roto that I've done here took me, believe it or not, way less than 1 minute. This is why I used it, and as I told you, there will be a tutorial on that tool as soon as it is officially released. But anyways, let's continue. We have our roto on top here. So now that means once the background fades out, I still have me sitting on top and the wave warp effect is happening behind me. And now we can finally get to our third step, which is the displacement. So let's create two things. Let's create an adjustment layer, call it displacement map FX. So here's our effect, and we search for the displacement map. And then we also have to create, let's disable it for now. And now we also have to create a displacement map layer. This tells the displacement map how much it should distort the image. So a neutral gray does nothing, and everything that is more white or brighter distorts the image in one direction, and everything that is darker distorts it in the other direction. So we do that with the luminance for horizontal and vertically. But now we have to define a displacement map, and we create that out of our roto here, because you remember the displacement should be in my shape. To get a black and white image of myself, I simply tint it. And I can also solo this, and then I add a levels effect behind it, because as I told you, gray does nothing and black and white distorts the image. So I want to create an image that has bright and dark parts, so I'm simply crushing the levels. But only so much that I'm not distorting the image. So, but what about all the parts around my body? As I told you, gray does nothing. So I'm creating a new layer by hitting Ctrl Y. Go to the color and simply set it to 0.5 for each channel, which leaves me with pure gray. Now I'm pre-composing this and call it displacement map. So now I have a displacement map and I have a displacement map effect. The displacement map I don't need to see, so I can just drag it beneath everything. And in the displacement map, let's turn off the wave warp for now, so that you can only see what this is doing. Maybe we also turn off the footage. Turn on the displacement map, choose our displacement map for our displacement map layer. And now, as I told you, we can crank this up. And when I play this now, you see that I have this ghost effect going on. So obviously we want the displacement map effect to also fade in. So we can simply animate it with our intensity. So I set 2 keyframes, bring them in. So I'm going forward a few frames, set those back to 0, and then I'm simply copy and pasting them somewhere to the end. Maybe even further at the end. So we are actually getting somewhere. I don't like the wave warp to be there until the end, so I really tighten this up so it's just around the effect core. And hey, while I'm teaching you all of this, remember, once everything is set up, and I finished this tutorial, this would normally be the part where you start fine tweaking and really invest hours of pushing keyframes, setting them to easy ease and so on. So I'm really just showing you what is the core, the base of this effect, and then please play with it, make it look awesome. Okay, having that said, let's make this look awesome. So after our displacement effect, we want to add the flomotion effect. So let's create another adjustment layer, call it flomotion, and search for the effect. And there we have it. Okay, I'm going to the point where the effect should be the most, and here we have the flomotion effect. So I can set the not 1 and set it to about the middle where the effect should happen, or where I want to be sucked into. And what you can do with the amount 1, when I bring this up, you see it sucks everything in. And you can get really super awesome crazy effects with this one. As you see, it bends, distorts, and also duplicates the image in a really organic, natural way. So really fine. But I also played with 2 settings, the finer controls, so I can really have this more subtle. Also the fall off, which means the area around that point that gets affected by the effect. Okay, and then we set a keyframe for the amount. You can hit U to see all the keyframes, and then at the beginning and end, we simply reset it to 0. And let's have a look. Still not looking great, let's be honest. So let's go on. Next one is our portal. So let's create our portal. We create a new layer and choose a color, and I'm just choosing something like this. Let's hide it for now, because then we can again go to the part where our effect happens the most and create the shape of our portal. And something like this looks fine for me. We can directly set it to add for the blending mode and feather it. And to open and close the portal, what I have done is I simply animated the mask expansion. So I set a keyframe again at the middle, and in the beginning I want the expansion to be negative, so it shrinks down, maybe until so, and let's copy and paste it. Portal can close again a bit sooner. And now we can also call this our portal and make this look cooler with a bunch of effects. Just solo this, get rid of the add effect and set it to normal, maybe on black background. So I just clicked on that icon here to toggle between the alpha channel and black background. And let's bring out a fractal noise. And you can really play with that to get a look that you are after. But in my case, smeary works best. And I also brought up the contrast. Also transformed it a little bit like so. And for the blending mode, I choose lighten. In that way, it mixes with our blue color. And when I unsolo this and set it back to add, you can see that we now have a better looking portal. But again, let's work on this. When I play this now, it's just standing still. So I want to animate the evolution, because when I go through this, you see that it starts animating. And I could set a keyframe for 0 and then go forward and set another keyframe. But hey, you want to learn something. So let's create a small expression. So hold down the Alt button and click on the evolution stopwatch. And now you can type in something. And we want the evolution to always go on. The further the time goes, the higher the evolution should be. So I'm typing in time, which will take the current time where the playhead is and multiply it with a number. So let's try this one. So at 0, you can see it's 0 because we have timing is 0 times 222 is nothing. At 1 second, we have 222 because it's 1 second times 222. And now you see, while the portal is opening up, it is also animating. Great. Absolutely what we wanted. But still, we can tweak the portal a little bit. So let's bring out a vector blur. And I specifically like the vector blur if I want to create something that looks energetic, organic. And you will see that in just a second when we bring up the amount. You see, this is with and without. And to make this pop even more, I want to add in a lot of contrast. And to bring in contrast, I'm just sliding in the whites and blacks with the levels effect. Okay. And that should be it for our portal. And again, I'm playing a little bit with the timing here. So next thing that we want to do, I want the portal to be behind myself. And you can just now take the footage that you have rotoed out, and hey, by the way, if you don't want to go that advanced, simply use a green screen. Film yourself standing in your living room in front of a green screen, and then film the clean plate of just your living room. I just rotoed me out because I am interacting with the chair, and in that way I couldn't use a green screen, but obviously if you want to, feel free to. So you see, now I am in front of the portal, and again, let's do that with the transparency. So now I want to get sucked in. Let's quickly move our flomotion effect above all of this. So now the portal as well as myself get affected. About here I want to fade away. So I could simply fade away. Again, I could set a keyframe, and until here I want to fade away. Nothing easier than that, but let's make this a little bit more advanced. Unsolo myself, and I want to shrink into the middle. So therefore I'm using a choker effect. I set a keyframe at the beginning, and when I want to be completely sucked in, I simply bring out the choke mat, and that shrinks me. And you see, 100 isn't even enough, but you can simply duplicate the effect. So now it looks like I'm getting sucked in, and in combination somewhere around here I want to completely disappear. So I do that with the transparency and again with our vector blur. Remember, the vector blur just makes it look super organic. So when you take a look at this and I bring out the vector blur, this is what we will get. So let's set a keyframe here, and while I'm fading away, I'm also increasing the vector blur, which now leaves us with this. Really great. And we could already leave it here, but let's bring this one step further. Because also, while I get sucked into the portal should also be more around me. So nothing easier than that. I simply duplicate the portal and bring it above myself. And then I can simply play with the transparency. So maybe 50%. And of course, this also fades in. Really nice. So let's add one last effect to this before we go on. And this will be a glow. And a glow always helps. So I'm just using the same mask from the portal. So let's copy the mask and put it onto the adjustment layer for the glow and bring out a glow. And now we simply play with this a little bit. I want this basically to blend over my body like so, but then the intensity is just too much. And again, we keyframe this. And that leaves us with this really cool effect. And we are almost done. Let's recap. We have edited this, we have added the wave effect, we have added a displacement, the flomotion effect to bring all of this together. We have put the portal behind myself so that I can get sucked in. And then we have also put it on top. So last but not least, we want to create the outlines. And hey, after that, I'm going to show you 2 or 3 more small tricks and tips on how to make this look even better. So stick with me. Again, we are taking our roto and I bring this beneath the flomotion, but above the glow. So I just reorganized it real quick. And now let's solo this. I want to create blue outlines, and therefore I'm going to show you a really cool effect called Vegas. Simply drag and drop it onto the footage and you already see something happening. I have like white lines, and this is because it searches for either masks or image contours. So for the color, I'm picking the same one as for the portal. And now I can simply play with this. I can play with the width of this. So let's maybe just make this 4. With the hardness, with so much stuff. You can even animate this forward. And inside the image contours, you can also play with the threshold. So that means you can really define where your blue lines should be. And I want them to be somewhat on the outlines. So something like that looks fine for me. And of course I want it over the transparent. So this is what I have now. That's really looking cool, right? But again, let's tweak this a little more. Again, I'm going for the vector blur. Those lines are a little bit too thin and you can always see those kind of stairs, those anti-aliasing lines. So I'm blurring this a little bit with a Gaussian blur, just a little bit, so that we get rid of those small things that are a little bit distracting. And after that, I'm adding a glow to it. And for the blending mode, this time I'm going to screen. And I call this blue outlines. And as I told you, I want something to happen before the effect even starts. So let's fade them in for the first few frames and maybe keep them almost until the end. So this is the part that really stands out. Maybe that started a bit too early. Maybe we want this just before the portal opens. So as kind of a introduction to the portal, something electric is going on. And also we want to fade this off a little bit earlier. And let's just try to also increase the vector blur while fading this out. This should give it like a more organic fade off. And again, you can see in combination with our displacement map, this looks like something's going on here. Now that's really looking great. Just for the sake of it, I'm bringing out the footage too and simply bring it behind the effect. So let's start the second clip when the first one's not even completely gone. Before we quickly jump into animating the camera, 2 more things that I really want to show you. So let's create 2 more adjustment layers. First one we call C&A and the next one we call Sharpen. So C&A stands for chromatic aberration. There is no real chromatic aberration effect within After Effects. There are some plugins, as you see, from Red Giant, and that one is really, really great. But there are a few more ways that you can do it. You could do it by splitting up all the channels into RGB and then offsetting them. You could also use the 3D glasses effect, because there you can choose a red eye and a green eye and then offset this slightly so you get a chromatic aberration. But when they started introducing VR, so virtual reality, to After Effects a few years back, they created some effects who are meant to only be used in VR. And this is the chromatic aberrations, for example. But hey, it also works for normal compositions. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that it's meant to be for a 360 degrees image. So it kind of bends strangely around top and bottom. This is supposed to be an image like if you have the Earth and have it as a flat map, that would be the same way of distorting it. But as our effect isn't around the edges, we can simply create a mask, and there we get our chromatic aberrations effect. Feather this, and once again keyframe it for the aberration red, and let's set blue to 0 and make it green, so we have the standard aberration. And this really gives a completely new dimension to the effect. So again, we want to reset this to 0 at the beginning and the end. And again, you can play with all of this. And last but not least, let's copy our mask onto the last effect. And the last one I just put on top. And I simply wanted to show you what you can achieve with a sharpen effect if you overdo it. Because now it just looks like energy, but if you really overdo it, you see, you get like more details in that. So normally I would not recommend to digitally sharpen your image, but for that kind of effect, without, I would say why not? And again, I'm only using this at the total peak of this effect. And isn't this just beautiful how you can really see something's going on before the effect even happens, and see how it fades off at the end. Just around here, you can still see my feet sitting there. And just to finalize it real quick, I bring this into a new composition, bring out an adjustment layer, call it crop, add a crop effect to it, set it to 10% and only crop top and bottom. And this composition is only going to be 1920 by 1080, which is HD. Really center the effect. Set keyframes for position and scale. And once I'm popping out on the other side, I can zoom on that. So this is just really rough and really quick. What I always like to do is add a vignette on top. So this is really looking nice. If you made it until here, thank you so much for watching. And if you like what you've seen and if you learned something, then feel free to subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment, because in that way I can do way more of those tutorials. And hey, I know it was a very complicated tutorial with many details, so if you missed on something, or if you think, hey, I want to know the shortcut for this and for that, just feel free to write a comment down below, and I promise I will answer all of your comments. So now I wish you a lot of fun teleporting yourself into After Effects.